Thank you for joining us for the announcement of our 2022 Places in Peril. I'm Mark McDonald, President and CEO of the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation. 2022 marks the 17th year for the Georgia Trust Places in Peril program. Every year, the Trust identifies 10 sites for our list that we believe have historic significance, face a real threat, are representative of preservation issues around the state, and have the potential to benefit from heightened awareness and support from the Georgia Trust. The Trust will work closely with representatives associated with each site to develop unique approaches for their preservation, but we can't do it alone. Like all our programs, the success of the Places in Peril program depends on your support. One way you can assist these efforts is by becoming a member of the Georgia Trust, which can be done by visiting our website. Thank you for your ongoing support, and now let's unveil the 10 sites selected for the 2022 Places in Peril list. First developed in 1904, Ansley Park was an early suburban neighborhood of Atlanta and the first in-town suburb designed specifically with the personal automobile in mind. This National Register Historic District includes wide, winding streets and several parks, as well as significant residential architecture that reflects the various popular styles of the early 20th century. Ansley Park was developed by and named for the developer Edwin P. Ansley, who sought to attract Atlanta's wealthiest families to a quiet haven within the busy city. Today, the historic district retains much of its unique character in Midtown Atlanta. However, even though the neighborhood is listed in the National Register of Historic Places, it has not been designated as a local historic district, which would offer protections from demolition through city ordinances. Without that protection and review, the past decade has seen many historic homes demolished and replaced with insensitive infill buildings, nearly a point of no return. If too many contributing buildings in the Ansley Park neighborhood are lost, the district risks losing its National Register designation and the valuable incentives that come along with it. Located on the banks of the Chattahoochee River, the Chattahoochee Brick Company was founded by former Atlanta Mayor James W. English in 1878. The company was notorious for its extensive use of convict leasing, where hundreds of African American inmates were forced to work in deplorable conditions without regard to their safety, leading some scholars to refer to the convict leasing system as slavery by another name. Many of these men were worked to death or were left permanently disabled from extreme punishment. Convict leasing at the Chattahoochee Brick Company did not cease until the early 20th century. Industrial production at the site continued through the early 21st century. Today, all that's left on the site is a vacant, overgrown lot. The land is currently zoned for industrial use, and the brick company structures have already been lost to prior development attempts. Many people, including descendants of the Chattahoochee Brick Company convicts, consider the site hallowed ground. Preservation of the site will generate healing, foster dialogue, and lead to understanding of a difficult chapter in Atlanta's history. While the buildings and kilns are gone, the site retains significance worthy of recognition and protection. Originally a small farming community, the town of Gay was incorporated after its first store and post office were opened by William Gay in 1882. The town experienced little growth until 1907, when a railroad line came through. Through the 20th century, the small town flourished with the broader agricultural trends of the state, first cotton and then peaches. In 1972, after a period of decline and inactivity, descendants of William Gay established what became known as the Cotton Picking Fairgrounds on the site of town's cotton gin and peach packing complex, with 11 original structures. Since then, the fair has been held on the first weekend of May and October every year, providing an opportunity for arts and crafts, live music, and food centered around the town's antiques, business, and agricultural roots. Because the grounds are only active 2 weekends annually, the structures remain largely abandoned and neglected throughout the year. With no prior effort to properly preserve the buildings, there is potential for deterioration and damage to the grounds in the off-season. Additionally, existing zoning in Gay does not provide protection for its historic resources, making the site more vulnerable to the threats of commercial development. The Georgia B. Williams Nursing Home was a nursing center and private residence of third-generation African-American midwife Beatrice Borders. Beatrice, nicknamed Miss B, was a certified nurse that helped deliver children as a midwife in Camilla and in the surrounding area, primarily for white families. In doing so, Ms. Borders recognized the harsh disparities in natal care provided for African-American women, and in 1940, she opened her own maternity home for expectant mothers within her community. She named it the Georgia B. Williams Nursing Home in honor of her mother. This home became a refuge for over 6,000 African-American mothers who had nowhere else to go, allowing their newborns to enter the world in a safe and healthy environment during the years of Jim Crow. This unassuming structure has not received the attention that its history deserves. The building has been unoccupied since 2004 and is currently boarded up. Due to deterioration over the years, the home is now uninhabitable, making it more susceptible to threats of demolition. However, thanks to dedicated family and community advocates, the home where Ms. B served for so many years is now gaining the recognition that may bring about its revitalization. The Good Shepherd Episcopal School and the adjacent church are essentially all that remain of the historic Pinnock community, a settlement of the descendants of freed men and women in Brunswick, Georgia. Both the school and church were founded in the early 20th century by Anna Ellison Butler Alexander, whose parents had been enslaved. Known as a devout, generous Christian who served her community, Alexander's congregation regularly contributed funds for the less fortunate. In fact, Good Shepherd gave more to charities around the world than any other church in the diocese. Because of her leadership, Alexandra became the first and only black deaconess in the Episcopal Church in 1907. Almost a century later, in 1998, Anna was named a Saint of Georgia by the Diocese of Georgia, affirming the deep impact she and her school had on her community. Over the years, like many small congregations, Good Shepherd has seen a decline in parishioners. Financial resources for the maintenance of the schoolhouse have dwindled. Recent hurricanes and weather damage have taken a toll on the building, leaving portions exposed to the elements. A charming but unassuming structure, the Good Shepherd School is worthy of preservation as a resource to the community to continue the legacy of its founding deaconess. Built in 1949 and operated until 1969 by Harvey and Dorothy Lewis Thompson, the Imperial Hotel was Thomasville's only hotel that exclusively accommodated black travelers prior to integration. The hotel featured a first-floor restaurant, a barbershop, 8 guest rooms, and communal baths on the second floor. The Imperial Hotel was one of 10 hotels featured in the Green Book, a guide for African-American tourists on hotels, restaurants, and shops that would serve them during the Jim Crow era. The Imperial Hotel officially closed its doors to tourists in 1969. The building was then used as offices and briefly served as headquarters for a chapter of the NAACP. The building has remained vacant and unused since 2001, leaving it in a severe state of neglect. Recent efforts to stabilize the building have been successful, yet the long-term future of this important African-American cultural resource remains in question. Situated on a hill overlooking the 4,000-acre Old State Prison Farm in Milledgeville, the Red Hill Prison Cemetery is home to over 600 graves of incarcerated men and women who died at the prison between 1911 and 1936. License plates manufactured on site by the prisoners were used as grave site markers for the deceased prisoners, indicating each grave by number but not by name. Once the prison closed and moved locations in 1937, these graves were left unattended and neglected. The history of this site has remained an afterthought through much of the last century. Trees and undergrowth took over and obscured the graves, while the license plate markers have been left to rust and deteriorate. Efforts to identify the graves indicate the likelihood of more unmarked graves at the site. Without continued advocacy and acknowledgement, the history and context of the site will be threatened once again. The red oak covered bridge was built in the 1840s by Horace King or his son. Born into enslavement on a South Carolina plantation, Horace King was able to travel freely and was widely respected as a builder and engineer, constructing dozens of bridges in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. The Red Oak Creek Bridge is the only bridge connected to Horace King that is still in use, attracting hundreds of visitors each year. Because the Red Oak Creek Bridge has remained open to traffic, there is a consistent threat of damage to the structure. A recent accident damaged several structural braces inside the building. With its popularity, the bridge provides an opportunity for improved heritage tourism, greater access for recreation, and continued appreciation of history. But first, further protection of the bridge is necessary to ensure its continued longevity. The Tabby ruins are all that remain of a sugar mill and rum distillery built in the early 19th century. At the time, there were high tariffs on the importation of molasses and rum from the West Indies. Operated by enslaved Africans, the site also featured a number of Tabby slave quarters, 4 of which remain. After being hit by a hurricane in 1824, operations ceased at the mill and the land was converted into a cotton plantation. Following the Civil War, materials and pieces of Tabby were sold to the freedmen and women, who established a community nearby named Carningham. In 1934, the Historic American Building Survey documented the ruins that remained. Built along the Carnochan Creek, the ruins have worn away over time, with the loss increasing rapidly due to the eroding shoreline. The working buildings are all losing structures into the creek. The walls of the mill have collapsed, and one building has been completely lost. The effects of climate change are a direct threat to this early coastal resource. The West Broad Street School, a collection of 3 education buildings, sit on a piece of land dedicated to the education of African American students from the late 19th century throughout integration. The Minor Street building, constructed in 1938, dates to the Jim Crow era. The other buildings date to the 1950s during the equalization era. Although it has not been used as a school for many years, the buildings have remained in use since they were constructed. Recently, the Clark County School District proposed demolition of the buildings to allow for new construction of an early learning center. With no preservation guidance, the site's historic architecture risks being severely altered or lost. Local partners and community members have worked tirelessly to advocate for sensitive reuse of the existing buildings, allowing the new learning center to have a tangible connection to its important cultural history. The school district has agreed to reconsider its proposal, though final plans have not been approved and a preservation outcome is not guaranteed. The Georgia Trust looks forward to working with each of these sites in the coming year as we continue our important work of saving diverse resources all across our state. Again, we are grateful for the local advocates who supported each of these nominations, and we commend each of you for your continued support of preservation in Georgia.